Welcome to Boats and Pros, the podcast where we tackle all things boats and fiberglass repair. Whether you're a seasoned pro or a weekend warrior, we've got the tips to keep your boat in tip-top shape. Let's get into it. All right, welcome to this week's episode of Boats and Pros. I'm Nick Ireson.
I'm John Economy.
And we're here to waste your time. This episode, we're going to get down on some details about the tools of the trade that we use. We've talked a little bit about some of our projects and things like that in the past, and now we're going to start talking about some of the necessary items that you've got to have to get into this. First and foremost, I just want to make it clear to everybody that I'm a huge fan of Harbor Freight for many reasons. I'm not going to tell you that they're the highest quality tools that are out there, but they are convenient. They're pretty dang good for the price. They're always willing to replace them, and if you pick through them, there's some real winners in there. There are some certain items that just aren't worth it. If it's a tool you use every single day, it's probably not going to be a Harbor Freight tool. But if it's something that you pull out every couple months or once a year or something like that, I think the Harbor Freight does a pretty good job. So a lot of the things that I talk about, there's going to be at least a Harbor Freight version of them available to me. I've been at this quite a while, and over the years, I've bought cheap tools, I've bought expensive tools, I've bought a little bit of everything, and I think that my consensus that I've kind of settled on is that the fiberglass shop is a really rough environment on tools, regardless of the quality. I think that probably has something a little bit to do with me as a person, too. I tend to be rough on things. I think some of that is in knowing that there's a replacement plan on it, but there are times when you just can't always be gentle on your tools, right? I think you know this, John.
Yeah. No. I mean, especially Harbor Freight for fiberglassers, surprisingly useful.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like I've bought tools in the past where you're walking out of the store and you're apologizing to the thing already because it's ending up in the trash can and broken. No matter what happens, it's just a question of how long. So this week we're gonna end up talking about quite a few tools throughout this episode, but we're gonna give kind of like a tool of the week little cool thing that I found recently here. And surprise, surprise, this is a Harbor Freight product. Item number 59210. It's a carbide tipped 4.5-inch grinding head. I was in the store and I walked past this thing and I did like a double take, like almost hurt my neck. It's basically just a steel 4.5-inch grinding head that has carbide like grit built into the head. It's painted red, and these things, like, it almost looks like chunks of gravel on it. Like,
so it's 24 grit.
Yeah, 24 grit. I mean, the thing is like ridiculously aggressive. Like, this is certainly not a precision finishing up grinder or anything like that. I guess there's not really a lot of finish grinding going on, but this is not the tool that you're going to break out if you're trying to be very selective and precise. This is, I used it last on a transom rebuild and just rip material. You got to use it a little bit too, I think, John. And I mean, for the whopping $9.99 that you're going to pay for this thing, it's paid for itself already for me in just one job. When you look at the cost of grinding heads, there might only be like a standard 4.5-inch pad is probably only $1 or $2, if you buy them in a 20 pack or something from like Klingspor or something like that. So I'm sure this thing will last long enough for me to save money on the $9.99 that I bought just in grinding heads, but some of it is time as well, like not getting out of the boat or crawling through a hole or up over a ladder to go and get a new disc, and to just know that you're going to take this thing in there and it's going to outlast you as far as like the grinding session length goes. It's not, well, I haven't worn it out yet. We'll see. There may be an update to this where I come back and say that it actually has a limited life. I have already worn all the paint off mine, so I don't think that really is indicative of anything other than, wearing the paint out. But I'm going to keep abusing it. I recommend if you've got a demo project to do and you got a lot of grinding ahead of you, to give one a try. And so now we're going to get into just kind of a general discussion of the tools that we use on a daily basis in the shop. There's not a whole lot of tools for a fiberglass guy like a mechanic. I mean, I do recommend that you have a set of sockets and wrenches on hand and screwdrivers and pliers, grips, things like that. I mean, that's kind of standard for anybody. But I guess fiberglass specific tools is what we're going to talk about. So in addition to all those standard hand tools, things that we use on a really regular basis, number one tool, if I had to build an entire boat with one power tool, I'm picking an oscillating tool with a carbide blade. It's the little multi-tool that kind of moves side to side. I'm sure everyone's familiar with them. There's all kinds of different attachments that you can get. You can get scrapers, you can get sanding pads, you can get cutting blades. The scrapers work really well for removing C-deck or EVA foam decking. By the way, guys, I've heard whole discussions of people struggling to get that stuff off. Getting the adhesive off under it's a whole other thing. But to get the foam up, those razor blade style heads on the oscillating tool work really well. But for everything else that you do with it, you're going to want to make sure that you have a carbide blade. It's very important. It's the difference between cutting effectively for 2 or 3 minutes or, an hour or so. I would say,
Not even cutting, really.
yeah. I mean, if it's not carbide, you're not even really cutting. I mean, we still wear through these blades. I'm not saying they're going to last you forever. I'm just saying that while they're working for you, they cut fast and accurately, and they do their job flat against one surface and cut against a surface that's 90 degrees perpendicular to it. And so, because of that, it allows for some really precise cutting that minimizes your grinding time. You can almost use the thing as a grinder in a way. I mean, you can't surface prep an area with it, but you can cut off what you would have to grind off in a lot of circumstances. So I would say that if I had to pick one tool, it's for sure the oscillating tool. Um, One of my other favorite tools is a little belt sander. It's kind of like a little finger belt sander. It really helps you get down into the nooks and crannies of areas that otherwise you would be messing around with like a die grinder with like a burr bit or something like that. And a lot of times this gives you more control than that to me. So it's a 1/2 inch by 18 belt sander. Um, Also, surprise, surprise, sold by Harbor Freight. They make this in two variations. You can buy it pneumatic or electric. I've had both. The pneumatic version by Baxter is really, really, really good. I think that if I wasn't having air compressor issues right now, I would be running one of those. But the corded version is pretty dang good too. The only difference I've really noticed is that I think you're slightly more likely to pop the belt off um, more frequently on the corded version. But I'm using one right now, and it's been doing just fine for me. And I've been buying my belts from Klingspor because you can buy a whole pack of a certain grit. If you get them from the freight, then you're forced to buy the variety pack. And if you're doing like demo work, there's really only one belt in that pack that's going to do you any good. And if you buy them like in a pack from Klingspor or something like that, they average about $1 a belt, and they easily earn their keep at that price. And of course, everybody's favorite grinders, 4.5 inch grinder is like the quintessential glassman's tool. You've got the grinding head where you can use the carbide grinder that we were just talking about, or you can use the traditional discs, or you can use flap discs. You can put cutting wheels on them. It's a very diverse tool until the oscillating tool came along. The 4.5 inch grinder was definitely my favorite tool. And a 7 inch buffer polisher grinder. They're kind of called different things, but a lot of the times I find them being called polishers and buffers. But I do use them as a grinder, so sue me. And you can get the backing pads that fit on those. The disc style, I think they do have a few of the metal head style, but I haven't experimented with any of those yet. The John over there is trying to convince me just a few minutes ago to try one.
I mean, it looks fancy.
It does look fancy. Of course, you're gonna have to have a impact driver and a drill. This is dangerous territory to start talking about here because we all know that everybody has their brand. Everybody is loyal to their brand, and all the other brands suck. So we're not going to go too far down this rabbit hole. Ryobi guys probably aren't even listening to this, so we don't need to really get into that. But pretty much everything else, I think they have some good products. I've got a set of Makitas right now that are the little black 18 volt. They're waterproof, supposedly. They have been tested a little bit on that successfully, and they've been with me for probably 5 years, and I have been not kind to them. I have seen a couple of them break, so it's not that they're invincible. Mine have just been lucky, I guess. They're all kinds of different colors and whatever. You've had some really good luck with your DeWalt, I think, right?
I bought it used. Um, 15 years ago, and it still works. It's starting to go out, but
Yeah, I just want to say real quick to me, like, and don't take this personally, but buying a used impact driver is kind of like sniffing another dude's underwear.
that's okay.
I said it.
Yep, I'm okay with that because for what did I pay? I paid $60 for it with the charger and two batteries.
And we
It's
do still
lasted
use
me,
it from
yeah,
time to time. I'm not gonna
15
lie.
years, man.
It's just that when you pull the trigger, it's sometimes you got to wait a little while before anything happens, or
Oh, it's got to build up
she sneaks up on
excitement.
you and the screw.
Yeah,
Yeah. But so, and of course, Milwaukee, the whole cult over there. I don't want to get anyone over there riled up. Milwaukee makes good stuff too, guys. So a drill driver and then a DA sander, which you'll learn as we discuss fairing and other projects that I'm not a huge fan of DAs at all. There's a lot of guys who live and die by the DA, and you could scare the crap out of them with a sanding block. So
I would recommend though, if you're gonna spend a little bit of money on a tool, good drill bits really make a difference.
yeah, well, they do. Yeah, I thought you were gonna recommend a DA there, which Dynabrade is making some pretty good stuff right now if you're looking for DAs. But on the topic of drill bits, I couldn't agree more, especially when you find yourself in a project where you're not just drilling a hole, but you're trying to use the drill bit to like extract a broken bolt or drill out a bolt or drill through steel or really anything other than wood. You know, wood you can do just about any kind of quality drill bit. But yeah, we played a game not too long ago trying to get some broken bolts, and
And
Harbor
it
Freight is not the move on drill bits. I'm sorry.
ended up taking it to JP.
We did, yeah. We got a bolt helicoiled out for $20, drilled out and helicoiled, and I was delighted with that because I was going to spend a lot more than that on just one drill bit to try to get it. So I think the takeaway from that is sometimes you got to quit while you're ahead. Although I don't know if we were ahead when we quit because we had already broken off a extractor into it and drilled it out again. And sometimes you just got to pass it on to someone who knows what they're doing. And of course, if you're going to have a DA sander or any pneumatic powered tools, or you're going to be spraying anything, you're going to have an air source. And of course, if you're going to use any pneumatic tools or you plan to do any painting or spraying, you're going to have a source of air compressor, which is a whole another story. But air compressors, I would say that you're going to have to be looking for some specifications, specifically if you're spraying, with pneumatic tools, you can just be patient, I guess. But with a die grinder or a little belt sander or something like that, you're going to want to make sure that your compressor can supply 70 to 90 psi. You really want to be closer to the 90 side of that, I think. And when it comes to spray guns, they really only need to have a consistent 40 psi. So pressure wise, your air tools are going to be more demanding. And airflow wise, I think that your spray guns could possibly be more demanding. CFM wise, you really need to be looking at like at least 5 CFMs for pneumatic tools and 8 CFMs or so for spray guns to not be struggling. One of the issues that you run into when you're spraying, if you have a lack of compressor power, is that your fan pattern is going to start to vary as the pressure goes down. Your fan's going to get narrower, and then the compressor kicks on, and your fan widens back out, and it makes it really hard to lay down a consistent coat. So that's something that you're going to want to look out for. From a tank size perspective, you really need to be looking at 20 gallons and upwards. For some little spot jobs here and there, you probably could get away from that to a little bit smaller. But if you're going to go out there and get a compressor for a project, you want to be looking at least 20 gallons. And, the closer that you can get to 10 CFM, the better, and an absolute bare minimum of 90 PSI. You're really going to want something that does more than 90 PSI. We did a little poking around on the Harbor Freight website, and their McGraw oil-free 175 PSI 21-gallon air compressor is $299. So if you were to be looking for something to go out and grab to get started, I would say that would be a sufficient tool for the job. And the absolute belle of the ball, best item that you can get in the Harbor Freight store, bar none, in my opinion, of course. The Purple Nurple Saturday night special pop and drop paint gun, baby.
Was it $15?
Sometimes it's like 12, goes all the way up around 17. They sell a version that comes with a regulator. Don't waste your time on that crap. You can just regulate the air pressure coming into the gun with a little knob right on the bottom. Great little tool. I've done some pretty decent paint jobs with these things. There are a couple things that you have to remember when you're going to use them. John, number one rule with a Harbor Freight purple gun, what is it? Boom.
Clean it as soon as you get it out of the box.
Yeah, don't even look at that thing without cleaning it. They've got a guy over there wherever they make these things, and his job is to take each brand new purple gun and dunk it in a tank of oil. Then he pulls the trigger down, swishes it around, and then stuffs it in a plastic bag.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. And I mean, if you don't clean this thing with solvent before you use it, don't even bother. That is probably actually the tip of the week. But once you've got it clean, it's a great little gun. They are a little bit hit and miss on the quality as far as consistency. Every now and then I've had issues with them where you will try to adjust something and the threads bind up on the needle, or the regulator built into it just doesn't work, or they just don't quite spray right. But it's rare. I would say it's like 1 out of 20 or less. And a lot of the time I'm buying these things 2 or 3 at a time. And if it does the job for me once, then it doesn't owe me anything. At $12, if I pull off one successful paint job on something, even on a smaller part, I'm good. I'm not saying that that's all I expect from it. I clean them. You know, once we get into the 2 or 3 or 4 sprays, if it dies, it dies. We give it a Viking funeral and just let it be. A lot of times we're spraying gel coat out of these things, and so you know it kicks in the gun sometimes. Spraying gel coat is not really the most glamorous of process. A lot of times it's sputtery and thick, and it kicks on you if it's hot, and it can be a pain. So if you've got a really expensive gun that you're spraying gel out of, then you're basically just setting yourself up for heartache. In my opinion, it just doesn't work. If you need to get a lot of material out of the gun, the Harbor Freight pressure pots work really well, but we'll talk about that in another list of tools.
I would also recommend getting the Spectrum cups and the adapter.
Yes, as someone who is on the spectrum himself, John is very familiar with these cups, and they are a great addition. It's like a little plastic cup and a liner. It has a filter built into the lid, and I recommend if you're spraying it with gel coat that you rip that little filter out of it, because it's going to slow your gel coat down. But those are a solvent saver for sure. I think they're $13 for.
Well, you got to get the starter pack that has the plastic cup in it. I think the initial is $20 for the starter pack that has the plastic cup and a set of 5 lids and disposable liners, if I'm correct. And then the adapter, I believe, is like $11.
Yes, the adapter is $11. The Universal Paint System Starter Kit, which comes with the cup and the screw-on lid, and then the liners and lids, is $14.99, and that gives you 5 cups. Yep. And then the refill kit. Oh no, the adapters are $4.99, and the refill kit for this is $15, and you get 10 of them. If you're buying acetone to clean the cup every time, then these Spectrum cups definitely help you. They also have ratios on the side of the main cup shell, so you can use that to help you measure paint, especially if you're adding reducer and spray converter and stuff like that, if you're getting into all grip. But just for gel coat, they just save you a lot of time. And if the whole thing starts to kick, you can pop that liner out of there, and you only have to worry about the gun. You don't have to worry about trying to save your cup too. So definitely the purple spray gun. And a little tip that I also have for the purple spray gun, it comes as a 1.4 millimeter tip, which is really about perfect for all grip or all craft or like a single stage paint. But when you're trying to spray gel coat with it, even if you're reducing a little bit with Duratec or something like that, it's just, you're really looking for a little more flow. And so in the past, I've had some pretty good success with drilling the tip of that out. You can take the tip off the gun. You unscrew the faceplate, and then the tip is kind of behind it, and they'll come with a wrench. You take the tip off and you drill it with a wire gauge drill bit number 46. It's essentially a 2 millimeter drill. You can go almost up to 2.3. I think a 3/32 drill bit is a 2.3, and I've done that in the past too. But you start to get into the metal around the casing of the tip there, and it's not as consistent. So if you're going to do that, I recommend that you have a couple of them on hand. And at that point, the gun is doesn't ever really stop spraying. I think there's always a little bit of material that escapes around the needle. So it's really a one-trick pony at that point. But if you just drill it out to like a number 46 or a 2 millimeter hole, it opens up the flow of the gun a lot, but you don't lose any control. The needle still seats in the gun. You can still adjust your flow and your pressure and all that. And if you just drill one out, then if you do replace the gun, you can just move that tip over instead of re-drilling every time if you choose to do that. And of course, no fiberglass shop would be complete without a shop vac. Got to have a good filter on it. A lot of guys use bags, but I'm too cheap. I gave up on bags years ago. I just use a filter, and when the vacuum stops sucking, you clean the filter. Well, and by that I mean John cleans the filter.
Yes.
Which I actually did kind of do something cool the other day, and I guess this is probably common sense and old hat to a lot of people, but it was the first time I'd ever done it. But the filter was all clogged up with fiberglass dust, and I took a contractor bag, I just dropped the filter in it, twisted the top to seal it up, and I just shook it and kind of smacked it around and got probably half a pound or a pound of dust off that thing in the bottom of the bag, and then pulled the filter out and kicked it across the shop a couple times to polish it up, and we were back in business. And on the note of shop vacs, I had a while ago, I think they still sell them at Home Depot. It's been a while since I bought one, but they sell a 25-foot shop vac extension hose. And it is really, really nice because a lot of the times you kind of want the shop vac, but you don't necessarily want to pick it up or climb up the ladder with it, or like the amount of effort required to get it where you need it to be sometimes is enough effort to discourage you from doing it, or me at least, I guess. Having a hose where you can always just leave the shop vac on the ground and throw the hose over the side of the boat or down into the hatch or whatever it might be, making it that much more convenient means you're going to clean up a little bit more. And the cleaner the shop, the better. We all know that. Look at my shop.
The big hose, though, so it won't work on anything less than, I believe, 3-gallon or 4-gallon.
Yeah.
So if you have a little shop vac, it's not going to work.
No, if you have a little shop vac, get a bigger one. Okay, so I think that we've pretty well covered the kind of hand tools or power and pneumatic tools that we use on a mostly regular basis. There is a trimmer tool made by Bodie, a pneumatic diamond wheel trimmer tool that we use very regularly when we're producing parts, but I don't think that really fits into the general fiberglass daily use tools. That's a specialty tool that we need, I guess.
Not your garage doers.
No, definitely not relevant if you're restoring a boat or something like that.
No, more production,
yes.
Cutting off flanges and...
Exactly. And what a great segue into our next discussion, John. We're going to talk a little bit about the equipment that we use when we're building parts, the gel coat rig and the wet out rig, as we would call it. We are big fans of a company called Phoenix. They're American made down in Largo, Florida. Shout out to Scott and his daughter, Lauren McGee. If we're lucky, Scott's going to come talk to us one day. I've kind of got that coming down the pipeline here. I think he's willing to do it, and I think that it could be beneficial for everyone to hear from the man himself, but I'm going to give you a brief overview on this stuff right now. Gel coat is thick, so it's very hard to spray into a mold with anything other than a gel coat rig on a consistent basis. So when you're trying to spray gel coat into a mold, you need to at least achieve 20 mils of thickness on a unreduced gel coat. You don't want to add any solvent or anything like that to make the gel coat thinner to spray easier. So when you're going to make a part like that, you can't really get away with using the purple gun. On a very, very small part, like a dashboard door or some silly little desktop-sized piece, for a 1 or 2 pull run, you could probably get away with the purple gun. But on a production level, it's not even something that you could consider. So then you start talking about either a dump gun or a cup gun, a lot of people call it, which is basically this gun takes paper quart cups and you mix the material in the cup. And then the whole cup kind of has like a faceplate lid that goes onto the cup. and the lid has a hole in it, and that hole is the spray tip. And you put the cup and the lid onto like a handle that the air hose hooks up to, and basically it's like just one step above a siphon gun. It's very similar to a bed liner gun. As the name implies, dump gun, it just dumps the material out. The trigger doesn't stop the material flow or anything like that. It's simply air assisted. So even if you're not pulling the trigger, if you aim downwards with the gun, it's just pouring out of the front. It's very much a primitive tool, but it is an option to get it done. And there was a period for a few years when we were making those green pump covers where we used those dump guns, and they got us through. We developed a system where we would fill all the cups that we knew we were going to need ahead of time, and one guy would be spraying, one guy would be mixing. We would count it off, or I would holler when the cup was getting low, and the other guy would add the catalyst to the cup, stir it up. I'd go over, swap the cup on the faceplate, put it in the gun, and shoot it. Every 3 or 4 cups, we would clean out the tip on the faceplate. Then we would just keep going, and basically we would run through sometimes 12, 15 cups, which they're not that expensive. They're probably 30 or 40 cents a piece. This was pre-COVID, but you can see how it adds up, and it's also one of those things where if you don't have that cup, the tool is kind of useless. So another option to that would be a pressure pot, like a 2-quart pressure pot. They usually come in like a 1.8 tip, or you can get them in a 2.5. I think Amazon has quite a few options. Those are good. They work well for smaller and maybe medium-sized parts on a semi-regular basis. It's a huge upgrade from the cup gun, but it's still not on production level unless it's like spraying flake on certain parts of a boat. But to do a whole hole with a pressure pot or something like that is pretty miserable.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you still have to have a mix guy, and you find yourself doing like a 2-pot rotation. And sometimes you have a third guy who's running material back and forth, and even then it'll kick off on you. There's a lot of times with fiberglass where the best laid plans go to waste with reality. You can think the plan through as much as you want, and you can prepare as much as you want, but sometimes environmental conditions just get the best of you. And once something starts firing off, there's nothing you can do about it other than regroup and make a new plan. And we've had days on certain projects where we've had to go back to Harbor Freight a couple times to get more spray guns and, giant gel coat resprays. I'm not going to get into details on that because it was kind of dark days. But so if a pressure pot's not going to do it for you, then you have no other. Well, I didn't mention brushing or rolling it on. I mean, in theory, you can brush or roll the gel coat into the mold. And again, that's one step below the cup gun. That's for a really small part and a really small batch. If you're trying to do a regular basis of anything and you're rolling gel coat onto it, you're going to have an absolute nightmare, and you're going to be out of business pretty quick, because the amount of time you're going to spend post-finishing and dealing with alligators or allegations and stuff like that, it's not feasible to me. So I don't even consider that production equipment, but it is in theory an option. But the real and only option for a production operation is what we call a gel coat rig or a gel coat pump. And it's basically a big hydraulic pump, but instead of pumping hydraulic oil, it pumps gel coat. It's got an air-driven motor on the top of it and a line set that comes onto a gun. It's got different lines that come into the back. There's a slave pump, which pumps catalyst. So as the main pump is pumping gel coat, there's a catalyst arm that attaches to that pump that pumps a smaller pump at the same time, same ratio, and you can adjust the catalyst pump to the percentage of catalyst that you want, anywhere between 1% and 3%. And basically you stick the wand down into the bucket or barrel of gel coat, and you prime up this giant hydraulic style pump, and you have different tips that you can put into the gun and different fan patterns. The gun shoots the gel coat and the catalyst at the same time, but they don't mix inside the gun. There is an internal mix option with a acetone flush, but I'm not familiar with that, and I've never seen one of those in person. I've been in a few shops, so I tend to think they're not as popular or as common as an external mix gun, which is what all the equipment I have is. Basically, the materials meet each other at the tip of the gun in the air, and as they fly onto the part, they're mixing together. Because of that, you never have to worry about any material kicking off in your gun. So you don't have those issues that a pressure pot has where it's hot and you lose a batch or something like that. But you do, of course, have a whole new set of issues when you're dealing with this equipment. For example, if that catalyst pump fails or isn't primed properly or has some air in the lines or loses prime or somebody forgets to put the pin in or something like that,
or the pin falls out.
Or the pin falls out, which we have had legitimate issues where the pin has worked itself slightly out of the spot that it goes into, and we've lost catalyst flow, and it was 100% guaranteed that nobody was at fault. We knew the pin had been in, and it just worked itself out. And that circumstance, luckily, we were using red MEK because we were spraying resin, and so we saw that the catalyst wasn't flowing, and we were able to avert what could have been a giant disaster. But yeah, sometimes bad luck can even cause some of these issues, as crazy as it sounds. But
there is no replacement for the gel rig.
There is no replacement for the gel rig. When you see one working in its environment, doing what it's supposed to do, just laying out 5 gallons of gel coat in a few minutes, evenly, smoothly, it's beautiful, man. I mean, that sounds silly to even say it, but it really, I think it's because I spent so many years battling with all the other options that lead up to a gel coat rig, that when I finally got one and got it figured out, and the maintenance on it figured out, and the hassle kind of minimized, and when you just see the thing doing what it's supposed to do, it almost just looks like it's shooting dollar bills out of the end of that thing. I love it. So you have your gel rig, and then you have the wet out system, which essentially is the same exact workings as the gel rig. It's a big hydraulic pump. It's a catalyst slave pump. It's an air motor that drives it. It's a line set that comes out to a gun. It's a wand that goes into a barrel. There's really only a couple of major differences. One major difference is in the tip. There's different tip sizes that you use for resin in comparison to gel coat. And the other difference is that it's spraying resin instead of gel coat, basically, and that you can add a chop gun onto the gun, which will then pull from a roll or a doff of fiberglass roving, which is, imagine a giant spool of fiberglass thread, and it runs through eyes up the boom arm of the gun and down into the back of the gun, or into the back of the gun, which has an air motor on top of it, and the air motor is horizontal. It has a rubber anvil that spins against a wheel that has 6 razor blades on it.
6 or 8.
I've changed those blades so many times I should be able to tell you. It's not 8, but now I'm thinking it's either 5 or 6. Anyway, however many blades are on it, these blades spin laid up against this rubber anvil, and the fiberglass strand is fed in between them. And depending on the spacing of the blades, it cuts the fiberglass spool into like half inch,
quarter of an inch, I think would be the smallest, and then you can get all the way up to like, if the blades go bad.
If you only put, when the blades go bad or start to fail, it starts shooting out what looks like,
spider webs.
Yeah, spider webs. It's a mess. So you could get up to like 6 or 8 inches long. The thing about these things is that they're finicky. I liken them a lot to a helicopter. There are a series of coincidences happening at the right time to make the desired result happen. And I'm sure there's some helicopter guys out there that are going to say I'm crazy or whatever. But that's my personal feeling on it. There's a little bit of luck involved with those things, even on the best day. But when you've got everything properly maintained and all your O-rings are changed out and fresh, and you do a test panel to make sure that you're getting proper catalyzation, the wet out machine is absolutely irreplaceable. When you look at a couple of guys hand laying fiberglass off of a roll and using a roller and a bucket to wet it out and then bust it down on a skin coat, in comparison to a skilled operator, very important addition there, to a skilled operator running the chop gun, it's like a Flintstones car versus a McLaren. I mean, they're not even in the same territory. You can lay a skin coat down on a 22-foot boat with 4 or 5 guys in 20 minutes. And to do that with material off the roll, first of all, you'd have to start counting the prep time to actually cut the material off the roll. And you'd be looking at, I don't think you could do it in less than an hour. I think if they did it in an hour, it would be really impressive. And these guys are the production lines over here by us, the jet boat builders and the ski boat builders and stuff. They're operating on timed production lines, like the Henry Ford model. And I think their turn time on a lot of these stations is 20 minutes. So that means that they're completing a whole process in 20 minutes. If they can't get it done fast enough, they don't add time, they add labor. So if they're struggling to skin it out with 5 guys in 20 minutes, they don't get 5 guys in 25 minutes. They get 6 guys in 20 minutes. That boat is moving every whatever it is, no matter what happens. And if something isn't done correctly along that process, or you run into a glitch along that process, you're literally stopping up the entire factory production line. You got to pull it out of the line, and it's a big deal to these guys. And they're counting minutes. When they measure their catalyst to make sure that it can meet their production specs, they're literally counting to the exact minute that thing is catalyzed enough to go on to the next level of the production. It's something that just absolutely would not be achievable to hand lay on a production level like these guys do. And the beautiful thing about the resin rig is that you can't only skin coat with it. You can take the chopper motor and the fiberglass strand off the gun, and you can just shoot resin just like you were shooting gel coat. So when you start to bulk the laminate with your structural materials, your 1708s, 3610s, etc., and you're bringing those in, then you can wet the back if you need to, or you can have the crew. Oftentimes there's one guy who never sets the gun down, and a couple other people will grab the next piece of fabric, they'll walk over to the mold, roll it out, push it all roughly into position, and then they step back, and the gun operator just walks over to that thing and hoses resin down onto it. And with experience, you know approximately what it should look like to have enough resin to soak through it, because it's obviously not going to soak into the fiberglass as fast as you're spraying it. So you can either kind of spray in a moderate coat and then come back and top it up, or once you've done it enough times. These gun operators do the same boat every day. They know how many passes they need, or how slow they need to move across that fabric to wet it out in one pass. And then they step back, and the laminators step back in, and they push it all, make sure there's no air bubbles, and roll it out, check for quality, then grab the next layer. And it keeps things moving so much faster. But the downside to these things, O-rings, O-rings, O-rings. You've got to have at least one guy who is smart enough to figure out how the equipment works, which it's not rocket surgery. They're relatively simple mechanical parts.
Well, that and Phoenix gives you a book.
Phoenix gives you a book. And not only does Phoenix give you a book, but if you have a question, you can call them, and they'll have their technicians get on the phone with you and talk to you like you're four, in a good way, until you figure out the problem. Every single time I've had an issue with these guys, they have stayed with me until I've gotten to the bottom of it, told me what parts I need to order. I've had times where I've literally had the owner on the phone working with me on an issue. But if that had been one of these other manufacturers,
you'd have to send in a request to have someone call you back in a week.
Yeah. Or I had one of the big dogs. I'm not going to say who, but their name has 3 letters in it. They charged me travel time to and from me to come and service one of my machines, and it was a couple hours on either side of it. And I get it. I'm not saying that you were wrong to do it, but it was an issue that maybe I could have been worked through on the phone if someone had wanted to. And Phoenix has always gone out of their way to be those people for me. Partly supporting small business and partly getting a lot of bang for your buck. They're if you were looking at getting into something like this, if let's say that you're on the verge of buying some equipment, you've made some parts, or you're getting ready to make some parts, and you're trying to figure out how much you really have to invest in something like this. I actually just called them yesterday to see what their pricing is, because after COVID, everything changes so fast. But their LF1, which is like their small machine, which is designed as an entry-level machine that's mostly going to work off of 5-gallon buckets. You can stick the wand down into a drum if you want to, but this is a smaller scale machine. $5,600 for a brand new one.
Wow.
Which, for the amount of work that you can get done faster than doing it by hand, that $5,600 is coming back to you pretty quick, based on the assumption that you have some business going already. And the nice thing about this is that they're willing to sell it to you as a chop gel combo. So basically, for a little bit more money, for $7,100, they'll sell you the gun, the pump, and a chopper motor, which goes onto the gun so that you can do your skin coats and stuff like that with it as well. I had times where I was using a little LF1 to spray two different colors of gel coat in a day, and then I would swap it over to a chop rig, pump all the gel out until it was pumping resin. And this little thing was just multi-purpose, work in all kinds of different directions, but I was willing to go to the hassle to change the machine around here and there instead of buying more machines because at the time it wasn't feasible for me. The thing did it. I mean, you could easily level jump your production with one of these things if you were already on the verge of needing it. I'm not just going to say that if you think you're going to start a fiberglass business, you go buy one of these things and you're off to the races. But when you're ready and you're thinking about making the investment, it's worth the jump. Provided you're going to use it regularly. You know, when was the last time we sprayed with the old gel or the old resin rig up there? Down in Sweetwater.
Yeah.
I bet you my machine right now, if I went to chop with it, it would give me hassle. I'd probably have to mess around with it for an hour or two. I'd probably have some crystallized resin in the lines, and that can be very frustrating because the clumps come out and they block the tip intermittently, and it causes you to have to stop what you're doing, pull the tip, clean it, poke it out, and that can be a real nightmare. And one of the only ways to fix that, I mean, you have to clean the filter or replace the filter, but you have to work that resin through. If you let some old resin sit in there, you can really get yourself into some frustration. So there is some wasted material that's associated with these things, but it's not usually due to their fault. It's when you let them sit around. So if you're not going to use it every day or, a couple times a week, I'm not saying you shouldn't get one, but you should be prepared to have to fiddle with it. It's not just going to work perfectly for you every time like it would if you used it every single day. You get these things and you use them every day, they will go to work. What do you think? Did we miss anything? Mill gauges. Mill gauges is something that we use in the production line of things that basically is a tool that shows you how thick whatever coating you just sprayed is. And imagine it's a little square that's maybe like an inch and a half square, and it's got grooves that are taken out of it, kind of like a grout trowel. But the grooves actually go to different depths, and they have a little number associated with each one. And you press that down into the gel coat while it's still wet, or the chop strand while it's still wet, two different gauges. And wherever the resin touches on the highest one tells you how thick that coating is. So when you're looking for 20 mils of gel coat on a part you just sprayed, when you want to quality control it while the material's still wet and you have a chance to top it up, you would spray, set it down, grab your mill gauge, and pick 2 or 3 of the hardest to reach places and check those. You don't check the big flat spot that's easy to reach. You need to hit the spot that you probably might have missed a little bit. And if you've got your thickness there, then you've got your thickness everywhere. All right, so we've talked about the tools that you're going to use and the equipment that you're going to use, but we haven't talked about how you're going to keep yourself safe. It's pretty basic stuff. Everybody knows the protective equipment that's necessary for fiberglass work. You're going to have a respirator mask. Yeah, at least one half face mask. These little N95 COVID style junk, don't even bother with those. If you're sanding some dust or something like that, I guess it'll do more than nothing. But if you're getting into any kind of significant stuff that you're trying to protect yourself from, you might as well go one step further and actually get a respirator mask with charcoal filters. For a while there, I was using a full face from Amazon. I actually need to order another one, but it's a mask and goggles built into one. Basically, it comes up, to your forehead, 5 head in my case, straps over the back of your face. You can replace the filters on the front. You don't get dust and spray in your eyes. So we were doing some pretty big hole sprays when I was using that one when it was fresh. My endurance in the spray was lengthened for sure by having a full face mask.
Longevity.
The longevity of my stamina, there we go, in the spray was extended by having a full face mask. So if you're going to get into something that's really stinky, or you're in an enclosed environment, or you're going to be dropping a bunch of material all at once, I highly recommend a full face. Even if you're just grinding, I mean, one of the nastiest things about grinding is getting the dust in your eyes. So if you're not going to wear a full face, you're going to end up wearing a half face and some goggles anyway. And, the one I had was like $35 or something like that. It was really nothing special. I bought an extra pack of filters with it. And then I actually bought a respirator mask bag. There was like a little one. It looked like a little dry bag, like a little canvas bag with a roll up and snap top on it. And every time I was done using the mask, I'd put it back in the bag. And I think that was one of the things that made the biggest difference to me.
That and the removable eye
Oh yeah,
filters.
yeah. I had like the peel off, like on like a motocross guy, where you can stick the filter to it or the screen protector to it and peel it off after the spray. Yeah, that was critical too. I bought a pack of those and stuck them in the bag. But a lot of times, what happens when I bought those in the past is you use it and then you just set it down on a workbench or a table or something like that. And sometimes if you're walking away from a big spray and it's hot or you're kind of tired, you don't really think about what you're doing with it. You just set it down, and sometimes you set it down like
It always goes mouth up.
yeah, yeah, face down, kind of. So the part that goes on your face is upwards, and then that gets filled with overspray and dust, and you come back over to it to use it, and it doesn't look very appealing to put on your face and sweat into for an hour or so. Keeping the thing nice in between uses is one of the most important parts of making sure that you're going to use it regularly, I would say. Of course, that's coming from a guy that's using it multiple times a day, every day. So it's a little bit different than a hobbyist level, but I don't think that the bag that I bought for it was much more than $15 either. So now I'm ready to replace the mask for another $30, but I still got the bag and I've still got some of the screen protectors. So it just kind of is one step closer to making sure that you're actually going to do it, I guess.
The other thing we go through most is
Gloves.
oh yeah,
And you're never going to guess where I get my gloves from.
my mom's house.
I get something else from there. I get my gloves from Harbor Freight, except for the fixtures.
They good.
When you want a glove that's going to go the distance, the exposure to these materials, the problem with them is they wear into the glove. So it doesn't really matter how good of a glove it is. For the most part, if you're doing an hour-long layup, by the time you're 45 minutes into it, the resin or the solvents have eaten into the glove, and there's holes in them, and there's resin on your hands, and you're kind of just, you're not quite gloveless, but you're on your way to gloveless. But the fixtures, I don't think that I've ever broken one in the middle of a layup, including when we were doing some structural material that we were pushing down by hand and smoothing down by hand. Yeah, so O'Reilly sells them for $23 a box. So actually, easy to attain and reasonable price. If you're looking for something, the Harbor Freight boxes when they're not on sale, they're $13. So for an extra $10, I wouldn't say that every glove you need is going to be a fixture, but if you were going to be organized, you would have a box of freighters and a box of fixtures, and you pick and choose depending on how much abuse that glove's going to get.
I reuse the fixtures.
Yeah, there's something wrong with him.
Yep.
I don't do that because you're putting your hand in there, and even though it's your sweat and dirt,
it's mine.
It feels wrong.
Nope, not to me.
Yeah, well, you're the kind of guy that would buy a used impact driver.
Just like underwear.
I think we've covered it. So there you have it, guys. You got the essential tools for the various stages of your project: cutting, grinding, sanding, finishing, spraying. Not only does having the right tool for the job make your work easier, but it's going to make your results better. And of course, safety. Oh, and I did miss, I guess, eye protection. If you don't have a full face mask and you're using a half face, please wear eyewear. I can't tell you how many times I've been wearing eye protection and had something happen that would have otherwise been a potentially eye-losing incident, including literally one time a grinder kicking back in my face, bucking out of my hands, and grinding across my both eyes and the bridge of my nose. I was wearing sunglasses at that time, and the glasses were totaled. The bridge of my nose was cut open, but I still have both my eyeballs.
Yep. Spreaders.
Spreaders.
Forgot about them?
Yeah, that's not really in PPE, though.
No, not PPE, but we're at the end of the show, so we forgot it.
Okay. Socks.
Winter coat.
Yeah, we're gonna need that soon.
Yep.
Okay. Well, we've been watching our statistics on the people who are listening to this thing, and it's pretty cool. We're seeing people from all over the world, even more this last episode than the one before that. We're not going to go through all of it, but we've got South Africa, Norway, Greece, Belgium, UAE, Spain, Poland, Fiji, Czechia, Italy, Serbia, Sweden, Estonia, Zimbabwe, Turkey, and many more. Some of them are just one per country, but still. Unless that's bots that are giving us false readings. I hope there's people in all those countries that are listening. That'd be really cool. So if you are, shout out to you guys and everybody else who's listening. Thank you for your time. We'll be back next week. We're going to get organized with some guests really soon here. I promise it's going to happen. You don't just have to listen to me and John babble onwards.
But it's fun.
It's fun. And just a quick reminder, if you're not a member of our Fiberglass and Composites Tips and Tricks group on Facebook, please head on over there and join us. There's all kinds of interesting information, posts, lots of informative stuff. And we have guys in that group who have years and years and years of experience. Who are always willing to drop a little bit of a knowledge bomb on you. And we also have guys that are just starting out. So don't be shy. Please come and check it out. It's Fiberglass and Composites Tips and Tricks. Also, follow this podcast if you're listening on Spotify, and we'd love to hear your comments. Thank you so much. Having said that, I hope you have a great week, and we'll catch you again next week.
Bye.